Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
The 17th of May 2015, the very first day, we at Newsfirst reported to you the destruction taking place at the Wilpattu Forest Reserve. Newsfirst was the first media outlet to report to you about the treasury bond scam that took place in 2015. And now, with the Wilpattu Forest destruction taking place, the Auditor General has prepared a report and presented it to the authorities.
The special audit report on misuse of Wilpattu Forest Reserve conducted by the Auditor General was released recently. Since 2009, allegations were made citing mass deforestation in the forest area surrounding the Wilpattu Forest Reserve taking place under the guise of a resettlement project. Based on these allegations, President Maithripala Sirisena instructed the Auditor General to prepare a report on the misuse of the Wilpattu Forest Reserve. The report was handed over to the Speaker of Parliament.
The Auditor General and the respective personnel who assisted in preparing this report must be thanked gratefully for preparing such a comprehensive report that clearly explains the destruction that has taken place in the Wilpattu Forest Reserve. Now let's take a look at the Forest Reserve itself on Google Maps, which the last update we can see right here. If you take a look at the map right here, you can see that the destruction that has been taken place in the Forest Reserve area. And if you look closer, there are plots of settlements here with several houses. There's no streamlined or organizational chart that shows how the houses have been built. However, you can see that this entire area of the Wilpattu Forest Reserve has been destroyed. Now, according to a gazette, the Wilpattu Forest comes under a protected forest area. That means you cannot destroy the fauna and flora in this forest reserve. Now let's have a look at another website, a government website by the Department of Survey. Now in this website, it also shows the landscape of the destruction that has taken place. But what I want to show you here is the entire reserve or protected area in this map. So you can see this entire section is actually protected area under this gazette which protects the forests of Sri Lanka. Now moving back to this map where we can see houses being built, but the question is, for whom are these houses being built? Take a look at the structure and the plots of lands right here. There is no order. So there's a serious question for whom these houses are being built. Now the Auditor General's report has clearly found out who has been living here and for whom it has been built. Let's take a look at the observations made by the Auditor General in his report. Even though the government had declared the Wilpattu Forest as a forest reserve, 650 acres in extent from the said reserve had been released by the Conservator General of Forest to the District Secretary of Manor for the resettlement of displaced people. The Conservator General of Forests had no authority or legal authority to do so. An environmental impact assessment report should have been obtained before clearing the forest reserve of 650 acres in extent in terms of the provisions published in the Gazette Notification number 772/22 dated 24th June 1993. Decision had been made to inform the Conservator General of Forests to release the lands required for resettlement in the forest reserve at Wilpattu at the meeting held on the 5th of October 2012 under the patronage of the Minister of Commerce and Industry. The aforesaid minister had no authority to take such a decision. Even though construction of houses for 160 families had been completed, the number of families unsettled had been 33. The number of partly constructed houses was 131. Number of plots of lands on which houses were not constructed but cleared was 706. However, it was confirmed that only 10% of the houses had been occupied out of 160 houses constructed according to the spot test carried out on the 23rd of January 2017. Houses of 44 families of resettled persons had remained closed. 41 houses thereof had remained unoccupied over a long period. Even though only the displaced families deprived of lands due to war should be resettled, the persons whom the lands were granted to had not been deprived of lands due to the war. The construction of houses and roads required for settlement of the people in the forest reserve were being carried out by the Omega Construction Company in Puttlam, and it was established that government financial contribution had not been made thereon. Let's now have a look at the recommendations that have been made by the Auditor General in the report on this forest destruction. To take steps to recognize precisely the individuals who lost their lands and provide them with an adequate plot of land in keeping with the national policies and the prevailing laws in the resettlement of persons who were rendered displaced due to the civil war in the north and east. To take action not to clear the forest reserves or the areas of environmentally significance to be used for the settlement of persons. Action should be taken to grant other appropriate lands to the families permanently residing in the west 20% of the lands and maintain the forest in its usual form. Finally, let's have a look at the conclusions made by the Auditor General himself. Measures had not been adopted in respect of the damages caused to the forest reserve and the environmental damages that may cause in the days to come. This project has not been implemented for the sake of the landless and displaced families.
When we first heard that they are felling trees in the Wilpattu Reserve, we travelled to this location. We gathered the details and informed the Director of Forest Conservation. He denied this, made a few calls and completely disregarded what we had to say. The Director of Forest Conservation should be fired immediately. He is as responsible for this crime as Rishad Bathiuddin. How did Minister Rishad Bathiuddin address this issue? He called us racists. He began slinging mud at us and tried to corner us. However, we stood our ground, and in our capacity as those concerned about the environment, we were able to state this. When we visited the area last week, they had begun clearing Pukulam. They have already built 15 permanent homes. They have passed a project for another 125 houses. This is right in the middle of the Wilpattu Forest Reserve. It is clearly mentioned in the recommendation that only temporary shelters can be erected. Still, they are planning to build 125 homes. A meeting will take place today at 11 between Ranil Wickramasinghe and Rangi Bandara. If you facilitated this back then because you were afraid of Basil Rajapaksa, this report provides some good answers for you. If you are going to do this now because you are afraid of Ranil Wickramasinghe or Rishad Bathiuddin, we will come in search of answers in the future. Then those who will end up in prison will be the officials, not the politicians. Keep this in mind.